Mount Everest, one of the world's top 1 tallest mountains. And while YouTube abounds and abounds and abounds with stories of summiting the thing, I see less talk about the pop-up city where those summit attempts kick off. That'd be Everest Base Camp, population 1,000, give or take, and possibly one of the most inconvenient places in the world. A 1 or 2 weeks trek from the nearest airport, no road access, no permanent buildings, and no Costco. Seriously, it's really far to the nearest Costco. So how does it run? How does it keep itself and its temporary residents alive? And are there yaks involved? I'll be disappointed if there aren't. Let's start with the base camp basics. It's here, at the foot of the Khumbu Icefall, selected because there's usually not an avalanche there, though not a perfect rule. It's at an altitude of 17,500 feet or over 5,300 meters because somewhere between 18 and 19,000 feet the human body starts to decay, and above that, human life is hardly sustainable at all. So this is about as high as base camp can safely be, which is why the other base camp on the Tibetan side of the mountain is basically the same height. That said, we won't be mentioning that camp again in this video, first because, for a number of reasons, way more Everest expeditions nowadays start on the Nepal side, second because the Tibetan one is reachable by car, which bores me. Base camp springs up around April 1st, the beginning of the narrow slice of the year where weather might allow you to summit Everest and survive. Foreign climbers get permits from Nepal's government to ascend with a team of Sherpa guides, and while the peak of their trip is, well, the peak, they spend a lot of time at base camp. The whole Everest climbing process takes about 2 months, at least half of which is spent at base camp waiting for good weather, adjusting to the altitude, or resting between trips upward to set up the 4 camps between EBC and the summit. And while summiters are who base camp is ostensibly for, they're a minority of its up to 1,200 person population. To get into who else is there, we need to take a minute for how summiting Everest works these days, which is basically down to a science, or perhaps more accurately, a product. Today's Everest tourists cut a fat check to one or another outfitter that plans the whole hike for them, hires Sherpas to guide them and carry their stuff, takes care of them at base camp, monitors the weather, the whole 9 yards. So it's still an extreme physical challenge, but it's not like wandering into uncharted territory. A quote-unquote budget outfitter might charge you a mere $25,000 to $40,000 for the privilege of maybe spending a minute or two at the world's highest point, then heading down quick so your eyes don't explode and hoping you live to tell the tale. A higher-end outfitter will charge you over $100,000, an amount that could buy you almost 13,000 pounds of Play-Doh. So for every foreign climber, these outfitters have 3 to 4 support staff taking care of them. Each outfitter, from the budget to the ultra lukes, has their own setup at Everest Base Camp, and some of them hire locals to head up before climbing season even starts to claim a primo spot. The result? At base camp, as in any city, some neighborhoods are nicer than others. Take, for example, the outfitter that will give you a private dome with a real bed, carpeting, hot water, a work-from-home station, and morning beverage service. They even have a party dome. They, like other outfitters, will also handle your meals out of one of their 2 kitchens, one with Western cuisine for foreign climbers, the other making traditional Nepalese food for their local workers. The more expensive an outfitter you sign up with, the more fresh produce they'll have for you and the better their chef, but any outfitter will make you 3 full meals a day, plus snacks. Beyond outfitter neighborhoods, there are services that support the Everest operation. Waste management, medical services, Wi-Fi, transportation for peoples and supplies, and that's pretty much it actually, but let's get into it. Frequent flyers of this channel know waste management gets tricky in remote places, and Everest's trash problem is Everest-sized. By one estimate, there are about 40 to 50 tons of it sitting up at Camp 4 from previous expeditions, an estimated 3 tons or so of, solid organic human waste above EBC. Once again, going here costs tens of thousands of dollars. Sanitation on Nepal's side of Everest is managed by the Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee, which sends trash recovery expeditions up to the mountain and, as I understand it, gives everyone government-mandated poop bags. Their 24-person base camp crew enforces modern trash rules, namely that every summiter must return to base camp with all their expedition garbage or they lose their $4,000 deposit, and that they also need to bring back 8 more kilograms of waste they find up there. Along with checking trash in, the SPCC sends it out. Burnable garbage to a human waste management facility lower on the mountain to be burned and buried, non-burnable garbage to Kathmandu for recycling, organic waste to a site near the climbing season pop-up village of Gorakshepa a bit down valley from EBC. Along with waste management, there's Everest ER, a medical clinic run by the Himalayan Rescue Association Nepal, staffed with doctors who have experience in high altitudes who treat both climbers and base camp staff. Outfitters pay in advance for access to unlimited consultations between their climbers and doctors, ideally replacing the need for each expedition to pack its own doctor. That said, Everest ER absolutely will not go above base camp, even in an emergency, even if you say please. They will, however, provide medical advice over the radio or help coordinate your evacuation to Kathmandu by helicopter. Another non-outfitter base camp resident is a company called Everest Link, which has placed 36 solar-powered repeaters on peaks and other high points throughout the Khumbu Valley to provide Wi-Fi access on Everest and in the villages below. During climbing season, Everest Link sets up shop at base camp to sell people Wi-Fi access for about $37 for a gigabyte or $150 for 10. They also service their towers, many of which are planted in melting glaciers and need to be visited every single day, all of which means it's technically possible that someone is watching this very video on Mount Everest. And to that person I say, put your phone down. Go make a friend at the party dome. As I said, there are no roads to get to Everest Base Camp, meaning you have to trek up to 2 weeks to get there. So it must be annoying when you arrive only to find that 6 or more helicopters land at base camp's 2 helipads every day of climbing season. They deliver food and supplies and bring people, sometimes living, occasionally dead, and more often right on the edge, down to Kathmandu for emergency medical care and/or identification. But you can't send copters for everything. Lots of supplies and stuff fly into Kathmandu, then to Lukla, then get picked up by a Sherpa runner whose whole job is to shuttle stuff up to the base camp by foot, usually in 3 days or less. Larger things, like big deliveries of food or big ship-outs of trash, go down on, you're gonna love this, yaks. Yippee! Yaks head in and out of base camp the entire climbing season, saddled up with big old bags, sometimes rocking an earring. Apparently they're toying with drone delivery, but why would you ever replace a yak? Who would you rather hang out with? This guy or this guy? Eventually the season's climbers have succeeded, failed, or died, and base camp comes down. Paying climbers leave first, then camp staff pack up all their stuff and yak or copter it down valley either to rented space in villages between Lukla and base camp, or all the way to Kathmandu. And like that, Everest Base Camp shrinks down to pretty much nothing. For 10 months anyway. The next April, the storage lockers open up, the chopper blades de-ice, the yaks get yakking, and they do it all over again. Circle of life. Whether you're using the internet on Everest or your couch, you deserve to do it securely. That's why you need this video sponsor, Incogni. It's a service that gets predatory data brokers off your back before they sell your information to someone who will scam you, spam you, or steal your identity. Because probably right now, a bunch of websites have your data, either because you gave it to them or because they track you. They sell your info to brokers who keep troves of data on you and everyone else and sell it to anyone with a buck. And while you have the right to scrape your information off those brokers' sites, you have to identify and reach out to every single one of them, file a request, and circle back every time they pick up something new about you. Incogni does all of that for you automatically, so you can rest easy knowing all these problems just aren't your problem. If that sounds good to you, you can use code HalfAsInteresting at the link below right now to get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan.